Hello, hello, dear listeners. Let's do this thing. Okay, as we get into today's topic, we're going to break it apart in a couple of ways. First, we're going to do a check in on how you're actually feeling. So, the topic today is feeling adrift. Let me not be the person to have you adopt that if that's not how you are feeling. Let's check in for you. How are you feeling? I feel a high degree of confidence that whether you are personally feeling adrift, or not, that you are surrounded by people who are feeling this way. This is why we are seeing tons of action in our workplaces in terms of driving engagement, looking to counter this thing called quiet quitting. We're seeing so many people step into new roles. It's why we have this concept of the great resignation that's out there and happening. So I know it's around you, maybe within you, but we're going to check in on that first. To help us do that, we're going to look at a poem. So get excited. I promise it will be fun. And then as we step into the latter part of the episode, we're really going to ask ourselves, how do we create the shifts that we want to experience? First and foremost within ourselves. And then also, how can we do this for the people around us? So that's the movement. We're going to check in on how you're feeling, read this poem, and then we're going to use the framework of emotional intelligence to help us understand how do we create the shifts we want to see. Okay, let's get into it. So first, checking in on how you're feeling, you might just ask yourself right now, how am I doing? You might be curious about when the last time it is that somebody asked you that. Notice that without judgment. You may notice that the following could be true for you. Consider if in the last 6 to 12 months, I'm not talking about all of 2020 and beyond, right? Just in the last 6 to 12 months, ground yourself in time. It's September 2021. Maybe it's springtime 2022. Like, take yourself there. Since that point in time, have you noticed that you are feeling increasingly tired? Have you noticed yourself having feelings of overwhelm, feelings of burnout? Have you faced change at home or at work? Maybe both. Are you increasingly managing not just the logistics for yourself and those around you, but also the emotions for yourself and those around you? And are you noticing that both of those things are changing? So just notice all of that without judgment, and then come back to, and how am I doing? What I am seeing in my executive coaching clients, in their teams, among my friends, within myself, is that we are facing an increased pace that is fast and constantly changing. Now, there's a silver lining. You know, I like a silver lining. The silver lining is, because we've been in a near constant state of change, we're getting better at managing it. So that's great. However, it's also exhausting. And when we can peel back the exhaustion and the stress and the burnout, we can see that one of the things that's contributing is that we're untethered. We're not rooted, we're adrift. And so it is my hope and my wish in our conversation today that you begin to see with new eyes what's going on for you. Bonus if you can think about what's going on for the people around you, maybe a person around you, a direct report, a colleague, a family member. And then call in, what's one small thing I can do to create a positive shift? So I feel a little more rooted, a little more connected, a little less adrift. Okay, I promised a poem, so let's go there. This is an oldie but goodie, The Summer Day by Mary Oliver, and it is famous for its last two lines. But I'm going to take us through the full cycle. So Mary begins with questions. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? These are lovely questions, very much rooted in nature, but also begins big, huge, cosmological. Like, where are we looking? Like, who made the world? I don't know. Who made the swan and the black bear? I don't know. Who made the grasshopper? Me personally, I don't know. But she's asking these questions. She's curious. Then she shifts into a section of this poem that's very focused on what's in front of her. She continues, this grasshopper. So, who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. She's looking at something specifically. The one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Do you see the level of detail? Like, she's really looking at the grasshopper. She's looking at what's right in front of her. She continues. Now she, the grasshopper, now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. Now, right, we're going to shift again. So she's asking these big questions and then she's centering in on what's in front of her, the grasshopper. How many of you feel seen the way that this grasshopper is seen by Mary? She's noticing what she's doing, eating sugar, the way she's moving her jaws as she chews, but also almost on a spiritual level, like what's behind those eyes? What is the quality of the grasshopper's gaze? And then sees her as she's moving on, floating away. So she's asking big questions, focusing on what's in front of her with a detailed eye. And then she continues. And when she continues, she's telling us what she knows and what she doesn't know. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Now, I live on a dirt road in the woods, in the mountains, in upstate New York. I like to imagine that there are times where I am paying attention to nature, really being present. And there are times I get there. This quality of just being feels really special. I I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention. And like there she is again in the present, just being. Then she shifts into the latter part of the poem. This is the end, where she's really challenging us. So as she says, stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, here's the challenge. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Whew, all right, Mary, there's the urgency. Like, we're all going to die. What else should I have done except be here? Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? And then she goes to the question that you may have seen posted somewhere because this is the one that we hear a lot. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Let me say that again. Receive this question for yourself as Mary's challenging us. Maybe take a breath in as you do. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Okay, I'm going to come back to something I asked you at the beginning of today's podcast. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Has it changed as you hear this poem? And what I want you to notice is, what's your answer to this final question? What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? I believe that part of the reason we're feeling so adrift is, yes, the change, and also that we recognize that only we can answer that question. Our employers can't answer that question for us. Our partners can't answer that question for us. Our kids can't, our parents can't, our culture can't. We have to answer. And part of the way we do that is gifted to us in this poem. We've got to ask questions with curiosity. We've got to see what we're drawn to pay attention to. It doesn't matter if it's a grasshopper or a crack in a sidewalk or wherever it is that your gaze is drawn, but like, what are you asking? And where are you wanting to look? And when you look and you pay attention, what are you seeing? And how does that help shape and inform to you how you want to be and what you want to give and what you want to leave behind? That's, to me, the gift in this poem. Is it's not just the challenging question, but the guidance that we're being given as we receive it. Okay, Mary Oliver, The Summer Day. So I told you I wanted to use the framework of emotional intelligence to take us through some distinctions. It goes back to this phrase that those of you who've been with the podcast from before have heard me say: we can't change what we don't see. So let's see something new. Let's bring that new perspective. So the broad strokes of moving through emotional intelligence is that you always start with self-awareness, and not just self-awareness with judgment, loathing. No. It's like bring a sense of love and grace and see what you notice, particularly around your emotions. What's showing up for you? How are you doing? What are you feeling? And based on that, you move into your second bucket, self-management. Now that I know that's how I'm feeling, how will I choose to act, to adapt? What's the mindset I'll take? What's the emotion that will serve me? What's the action I choose? Not out of impulse. So when we lead in an emotionally intelligent way, we choose. It's not happening to us, we're choosing it. So as you think about how you're feeling right now in your life and in your work, you can check in and see, okay, based on how I'm feeling, how I'm doing, how will I choose to act? And a simple example of this, which I suspect will feel intuitive for most of you, if not all of you, and it's okay if it doesn't, that's why I'm sharing it, is think about a time when at work something's happened. And by at work, I mean in the process of working. I know many of us are not in offices anymore, and some of us are. When we're at work, think of a time when you've gotten really angry. Maybe someone said something to you. It's like the saber-toothed tiger is in the room, but it's now showing up not as a tiger, but as like condescension. That's a trigger for a lot of people. Like think of a time when you've been really triggered and you've gotten angry. Okay, so like the moment is like with love and appreciation. There's my snap. With love and appreciation, what I'm noticing is that I'm angry. Or maybe you notice I'm sweating. I'm hot. There's a reason for that. Anger produces things in our body that make us feel hot and sweaty. Um, you might feel that you're starting to hold tension in a certain place in your body. Maybe you're clenching your teeth. Maybe your back is tightening up. Your hands are clenched. Okay, notice that without judgment. This is the emotionally intelligent thing. So I'm noticing these emotions that I'm feeling. And now I'm checking in with, okay, self-awareness. Got it. I'm angry. I'm hot. I'm sweating. Self-management. How will I choose to move? You might decide to do nothing. You might decide to yell. You might decide to hit send on that email that you wrote while feeling really angry. You might pick up the phone and make a phone call. That phone call might be to a friend. That phone call might be to your boss who said something to you that triggered you, whatever it is. Like just the movement is I'm noticing how I'm feeling, and now how am I choosing to respond? Okay. Go back to how you are actually feeling. And I want you now to center in on how are you feeling within your work context? How are you feeling at work? When you think about what is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life in your work context, how are you feeling? Okay, good. Noticing that without judgment. Based on that, how are you choosing to act? And what we're seeing now is, several different pathways that are happening quite a lot. So sometimes when we see how we're feeling, what we're doing is like just rushing ahead. I don't want to think about that. Please don't ask me to stop. I'm going to turn this podcast off. Like, I don't want to think about that. You're sweeping the feelings aside. Maybe they make you uncomfortable. Maybe you're not practiced in sitting in those feelings, but you're sweeping it aside to rush ahead or to ignore. You may also find, okay, I'm not trying to sweep it aside. I see it there. I see that I'm feeling stagnant. I see that I'm feeling frustrated. I don't know what to do with it. I'm not going to sweep it aside, but I'm going to like pick it up, compartmentalize it, and throw it over there. It's like a slightly different nuance of rather than just rushing ahead and sweeping it aside, we're acknowledging it, but we're somehow disassociating from it. Okay, like, but that's going to be over there, and I'll come back to that when I can. I can't do it now. Those two things, by the way, they might seem to you like, well, now Sharon's going to tell me I shouldn't do those things. Those aren't valid self-management tactics. I'm not going to say that. There's a time and a place where that might be your survival. Like that's how you can get through. What I will say is they're not sustainable to stay with that forever and ever, period. That's it. So at some point, you need to be able to actually look at it and do something with it, the feeling. Now, one of the things you can do that's more sustainable is you can transform the feeling. And this is hard, but we don't get to choose the circumstances that befall us. We do have a choice over how we feel about it. And that can be a subject for another podcast, but I just want to say like it can be done. So you can transform the feeling you have so that you're not sitting with it. And sometimes just by honoring it allows us to transform it. That's probably the fastest way that I see people and that I myself experience it. Like I know in myself that a feeling that I like to run past and sweep aside is when I feel sad. I'm like, yeah, that's good and all, but like, let's get back to my positive. That's my natural slant. So sometimes just by saying, let me take a beat. Let me literally take a breath and just sit with it and acknowledge what I'm feeling right now is sad. And I honor that I'm feeling sad. That's often like all I need to do for it to ease up. And sometimes it's deeper and there's other resources I tap into to deal with that sadness. But the point is that I'm looking at it to transform it. The other thing is like transforming is its own kind of change. You can also just sit with it and be with it. Just be in the practice of sitting. This is something I'm finding a lot of my clients are needing support with right now. We've been in such a state of survival that we're like moving to action. What can I do? How do I move? And so having those moments just to sit and be, that can really help. So back to you. And if you did nothing else other than check in with yourself, how are you doing? What are you feeling? Maybe specifically in the context of your work. How will you choose to move or not move as a result? That's the way you make a small shift. What am I seeing? How am I feeling? What's one thing I might do? Or including doing nothing, including just sitting and being. Okay. Now, emotional intelligence, this framework, we move from self-awareness to self-management, and then we're shifting into a systems context. Might be the system of your family, might be the system of your team at work, might be the system of the organization you lead. So we go into social awareness to relationship management. You might also call it systems awareness into systems management, right? We're now holding not just for ourselves, but the broader picture. If any of you are feeling an impulse to do this first, before you look at yourself, bring it on back. You always have to start with yourself. You cannot jump ahead. You can get agile and be able to move through that quite quickly, but you can't just go to how do I solve the bigger picture without looking at yourself. There's a reason this podcast is called Design Yourself. It does begin with you. Okay. So, social awareness, if we must hold love and grace for ourselves when we have self awareness, we have to do that also in the broader context of the social awareness that we're calling in. Now, in our workplaces, love can be taboo, although I personally think that word doesn't need to be, but a safe word for most workplaces, love adjacent, is empathy. So, can you hold empathy for the social system that you're a part of? Not just, I get it. I understand why you're creating this return to work policy, but instead, I get it with empathy. Not like I get it, but I'm really frustrated, but I get it. Like I can put myself in your shoes and understand the reasoning and with appreciation. I might not agree with it, but I am holding empathy for it. I'm holding love for it. Okay, that's what happens in social awareness. And if you stay in social awareness and you don't yet move into like, so how do I manage the relationship differently? How do I manage the system differently? That's okay. Like it's okay to just sit in the social awareness, just as it's okay to sit in the self-awareness before you act. So you can sit in the social awareness. And again, pulling from some of the common things we're hearing about workplaces, um, it's now common that we're seeing what is the return, not just to work, but return to office, like coming back in. What do those plans look like? Or maybe you're part of the companies that have become completely distributed. There is no formal headquarters anymore. Right, we're managing through that change. So, okay, I'm holding with empathy what that looks like. Now, based on that, how will I choose to manage within that system I'm a part of? You can do that through coaching and mentoring, managing conflict you might see, through working more efficiently as a team, through bringing inspiration to the people that you're leading. So there's a lot of different moves you can make around relationship management, system management. But the point is that you're starting with, okay, I'm holding empathy for what I'm seeing. And now how will I choose to move? I'm holding empathy that my colleague is coming to me repeatedly feeling frustrated with a decision that's been made that I don't actually have control over. I'm holding empathy for that. Back to self-awareness and self-management, I'm noticing that I'm triggered when this person is bringing me that frustration because I'm also frustrated too, and I don't know how to act. So I know that my move in my self-management has been to say nothing up until this point, just to say, I'll get back to you because I can't, if I engage further, I'm going to be in a venting session and that's not useful right now. So eventually, maybe you get to a place where you're like, okay, I'm holding empathy that I feel triggered, but I can bring myself back to center. I'm choosing now self-management that I'm ready to engage with my colleague and I'm holding empathy for how my colleague is feeling. And I think the move is to have a coaching session to help really understand what's happening and what's at stake for this person and to help support through mentorship on what choices they have. Those are the moves. So for myself, how am I doing? What's one small shift I can make? For my colleague, how are you doing with empathy? What's one shift you can make? By the way, same thing applies. I'm holding empathy for this team that I lead. How are we doing? What's one small shift that we can make to be more effective? Maybe we can't change the trajectory of what our revenue targets are going to be at the end of the year, where we're going to land because we have laid the groundwork for that. Now that's falling into place. But what we can do is be more efficient with our time. What we can do is be clear about the strategy that we're moving on as we step into next year. Those are things that we can do. So whether you are feeling adrift or your team is feeling adrift, maybe your family members, your loved ones are feeling adrift, bring that empathy and love. How am I feeling? How are we feeling? And what's one small shift? And why do we do this? Because here we are with all these things that can pull our attention, all of these questions we can ask. Who made the world? The swan, the black bear, the grasshopper, Right? What questions do you want to ask? What are you paying attention to? Where will you choose to give the gift of your attention for the sake of what you're going to do with this one wild and precious life? Okay, dear listeners, that is what I wanted to share with you today. As we close out today's episode, please know it is my deep wish that you will have found some inspiration, perhaps, maybe some resources to help guide how you're framing and thinking about this topic. And that as you move forward, that you're getting the transformation that you seek, whether in terms of how you lead a team, how you're setting strategy for your organization, or even simply how you are changing the mindsets and perspectives that you're leading with for yourself, right? Because that's where, as we said, that's where it always begins. So that is my wish, that you're able to get the support that you need. Please know I'm here to help. Yes, in this podcast and beyond. You can get show notes and other resources over at pointroadstudios.com. You can also contact me directly through the website if you would like to connect, tell me what's going on, see how I can help. I would welcome the opportunity to connect with you personally. And whether we are talking one-on-one or we are here together simply on the podcast, please remember that I will be here cheering for you, proud of you, and holding my deeply held belief that there is nothing stopping you. So go on ahead and get after whatever it is that you really want.